The book of Samuel, chapter 14. We did chapter 13 Sunday. Who all was here Sunday so I could see who didn't hear what I had to say? I know one. You were not. Were you out, Dan? You were here, yeah. And you were here, yeah. All right, good. I was here. Yeah. We had a really, really great day Sunday. If you were not here, you missed it. We can never bring it back for you. You just missed it. So, but we'll have another good one. They're coming up. God's moving and doing some great things. So, we talked about Saul and Saul's great mistake. Does anybody remember what he did that God had given him a command, something he was to do, and he did not do what he was to do? What did he do wrong? That's right. He basically, God told him to wait until Samuel returned, and Samuel was going to make the sacrifice. He was the priest. It was his job, his responsibility. He was the one anointed to do this. And Saul, rather than waiting on God to do things his way, took it upon himself to go ahead and offer a sacrifice. And it kind of seems like, well, that's a good thing. I mean, he was sacrificing to God, but God later says, it's through the prophet, he said, sacrifices and offerings are not what God's looking for. What he's looking for is obedience from us. So it's not religious acts that move God. It's obedience to his word. Why does God want us to obey him? Why does he give us commands and sometimes rules and guidelines and all those words that we in our natural flesh don't like? Lori? There you have it. That's all you got to say. She said he's smarter than we are. And that's the bottom line. Why do we tell our children to do things that they just despise and don't want to do? Because we're smarter than they are, correct? That's right. So Saul makes this great mistake. The prophet comes to him, rebukes him for it, corrects him, and tells him that now God is going to, if you were to look at verse 14 and 13, now God says, but now your kingdom shall not continue. For the Lord has sought for himself a man after his own heart, and the Lord has commanded him to be the commander over his people, because you have not kept what the Lord commanded you. So what the prophet, speaking for God, said to Saul was, because you did not do what God told you to do, now your kingdom is being stripped away from you, and it's going to be given to another man, because, and this was a key thing said Sunday, if you can key in on it, here it is, that because God had sought for a man with a heart after him, not a man who was good with a spear, not a man who was a great leader necessarily, not a man who knew the Pentateuch, could quote the Old Testament, not a man, he didn't name anything that David did. All he mentioned was what David was, who he was in the eyes of God. And God knew David to be a man who loved him and wanted what God wanted. So if God knows that we will do what he commands us to do, then he will entrust us with more responsibility. And in this case, it was actually to become the king of Israel. And he would take Saul's place in time to come. So that story goes ahead and plays out. There's a few more things that happen. Look down at verse 22. We're still kind of winding up that story, if you will. This would be 13. I'm trying to get to 14. 22 says, and it came about on the day of battle. Now this is after, Saul did that because he was about to go to battle and he was afraid he was going to lose, and so he took responsibility into his own hands rather than waiting on God. And so it came about on the day of battle that there was neither sword nor spear found in the hand of the people who were with Saul and Jonathan, but they were found with Saul and Jonathan and his son. In other words, the people did not have weapons. We talked about that Sunday. I don't want to repeat all this. But Saul and Jonathan, his son, they had weapons. And the garrison of the Philistines went out to the pass of Michmash. So this is kind of the end of that story, if you will. Things go on hold now. There are going to be some days pass. We don't know how much time passes before this next story or next chapter in the story kicks in. And so what's happened is all this has happened. The enemy's in battle array. Saul's disobeyed God. Now the people are scared. They've run and they've hid. We talked about they hid in rocks and thickets and crevices and stuff. And so Saul is like kind of waiting to see what's going to happen. They're waiting on God. In verse 14, 23 again, it says, "And the garrison of the Philistines went out to the pass at Michmash." So these Philistines they're setting up in different areas and they're getting ready for battle. And a garrison is just a group of soldiers. I don't know that. When I looked it up and to try to study and see what it meant, it didn't really say that it was a certain number, but it's like a camp out, if you will, a company of soldiers. So they moved to a strategic location. It was a pass. It was a place where the Israelites might want to pass through to come against them or to escape or whatever. So they set up near this pass. And this brings us to the next chapter in the story. And this story is going to have two other particular men in it and the Philistines. And the men are going to be, does anybody know right now? Right off? Thank you. You got it right. Jonathan and his armor bearer. Jonathan and his armor bearer. So we're going to see. I want you to, as we're just going to go through this story. This is a Bible study night, so we're going to study the Bible. We're going to go through this story. As we go through it, watch these two men, because they're two different responsibilities that they carry. They both have a calling from God. They both have an appointment, if you will, a responsibility that they're to hold up. But Jonathan is, number one, the son of King Saul. He is the king's son. Number two, it's going to come out in this, and you would see it if you just continue to read the life of Jonathan, what things we do have on him, not a lot. But what you'll see is Jonathan was a man of great faith. His father was a man of weak faith. Saul did several things that demonstrated that he really had more trust in man and in himself and in his army and things than he did in God. And you don't know sometimes how much faith you have until you're put to the battle. So you're on the battlefront, or you go through something and it starts to squeeze out of you what's in you. That's when we find out how much faith we have. Nobody wants to go there, but sometimes God allows us, I think, to go through things like that so that we can see who we are and discover who we are. And people say, well, God doesn't test people, but He does test people. He doesn't tempt people. You can find, I forget what the number was, but it's a large number, maybe 15 to 20 different places in the Bible where it says that God tested so-and-so. In this, the Lord tested them, and things of that nature. So God absolutely tests people, but He doesn't tempt them. The difference is, a test is to let you be in a position to where you have to perform to find out what your knowledge is, or who you are, or where you're at. A temptation is to put something in front of you that draws you toward evil. And God would never do that, right? Okay, so you get that. So, I'm in 1 Samuel chapter 14, and here goes the next chapter, page 2. Now it happened one day that Jonathan, the son of Saul, said to the young man who bore his armor, "Come and let us go over to the Philistines' garrison that's on the other side." But he did not tell his father. So Jonathan tells his armor bearer. Armor bearer is the one who carried his armor. I don't know if he had some kind of a cart he carried it on, or bore it on a horse, or what he did. But the armor bearer was responsible for making sure that when Jonathan was going to have to mount up as a leader of the army, he could throw his garments, his armor on, which also displayed his position of authority. And he had to be right there so that when battle was about to happen, or they were going to gear up for war, that he could provide that and help Jonathan to put it on. Because some of the armor, it took two men, yourself and another man, to strap some things on the back, or buckles, or whatever it might have been. So Jonathan's responsibility was to be the right-hand man to Jonathan. So, the armor bearer. Everybody say, the armor bearer was Jonathan's right arm. Okay, this side said it, that side thought it. It works on both counts. Okay, and so what happens is, Jonathan says to his armor bearer, "I got an idea. These Philistines have come over and they've camped over here. Why don't we go over and just see what we can do to them?" The armor bearer says, "Well, okay, whatever you need to do." The garrison is on the other side, but he did not tell Saul what was going on. And Saul was sitting on the outskirts of Gibeah under a pomegranate tree, which is in Migron. The people who were with him were about 600 men. And Ahijah, now you have to follow this closely, Ahijah, the son of Ahitub, Ichabod's brother, the son of Phinehas, the son of Eli, the Lord's priest in Shiloh, was wearing the ephod, but the people did not know that Jonathan had gone. That's just saying that Eli's great-grandson, I think it is, had now become the priest, and I won't go into the whole Eli story, it's too much to tell. And then verse 4 says, between the passes by which Jonathan sought to go over to the Philistine garrison, there was a sharp rock on one side and a sharp rock on the other side. One of them faced, well, let me see, I was going to skip all that, but one of them faced Michmash and the other one faced Gibeah. So there's two big rocks where this pass is. The face of the rock, it's like the side that's chipped off. One of them faced one town, one of them faced the other town, opposite of each other. Verse 6, then Jonathan said to the young man who bore his armor, come, let us go over to the garrison of these uncircumcised. It may be that the Lord will work for nothing. It may be that the Lord will work for us, for nothing restrains the Lord from saving by many or by few. So the armor bearer said to him, do all that's in your heart. Go then, here I am with you according to your heart. And then Jonathan said, very well, let us cross over to these men, and we will show ourselves to them. If they say to us, wait down here until we come to you, then we'll stand down here in our place and we won't go up. But if they say to us, come up to us, then we will go up, for the Lord has delivered them into our hand, and this will be a sign to us. And let me just tell you this story real quick. So Jonathan says to the armor bearer, we're fixing to go fight this whole camp of soldiers. Well, there's this pass with these big rocks, and these guys are stationed somewhere up on top of a hill or a rock, and you'll see that more as we move on. And Jonathan says, okay, let's do this. Let's go over here and show ourselves to them. Let's go over and just stand out here and let everybody see us. And if they come down, we're going to wait for them. He doesn't say what he will do if they'll wait. But he says, but if they call us up there, we will know the Lord has given them into our hand. Now, how he do that, I don't know. Maybe it's just a thing of faith. It's just, God, this is the test. This is what we're believing. If they call us up, I'm going to take it that you said we can have them. Because the man's a great man of faith. And he's saying to his young armor bearer, come on with me. We're fixing to go fight an army. Now, how many of you are going with Jonathan, if you're that guy? So they get to the bottom of this rock, this place, and they show themselves. I mean, these guys could have started throwing spears off of the rock at them and probably pierced them to the ground if they wanted to. But this is what they said. They're bold. These guys are warriors, These are real fighters. But you can't hardly find anybody that's willing to fight anymore. If you do, you're politically correct and somebody hurts your feelings for it. Men used to be men. Women used to feel secure because you used to have a man at home that would fight for them. I remember one time we had this really great suite. I mean, it was a sweet church split when we lived in Illinois, and I was young. And we had not been there very long. The church had grown really fast, and so all of a sudden, the seven that were there, the old story, the seven that were there when we came, they rose up and didn't like what was going on. So we had this church split. Well, my secretary was one of them, and I went in there one time and she was just crying. She was really upset about this whole thing. I don't remember how the whole story went. I'm talking like 20 years ago. But she had lost her husband to a stroke, but she was a young woman, like in her 30s. And so she was just crying, and we talked about it, and I just, okay, let me just say it. I'm telling the whole story, it has nothing to do with this. Let me get through this. Here's what happened. At some point in this thing, they pulled Lori in. They started attacking Lori. Somebody did. And so I'm in there talking to her, and she spoke up. And when she did, I just let into her. And I'm not that guy often, but I can be. But I just let into her. They're not going to come after my wife. They're going to go through me. And I don't know what I said, but I said it. Well, so she's crying and stuff, and I leave. Well, about the next day, I went in there, and she said, I need to talk to you. And I said, okay. She said, I want to apologize. And she started just crying. She said, I've never had anybody to defend me like that. You know what women need today? What they needed yesterday? They need men that'll stand up and defend them. And if you don't have a husband to do that for you, man, well, you need the church to do that for you. We as elders, just throughout the years I've been in the ministry, we've defended women in different situations, in different cases. You know, it needs to be done. And so we need strong leaders, people of faith, people of conviction. People who believe, when they believe something, they'll fight for it. This guy believed that God was with him. And you say, why did he believe he could just go up the hill and kill all these people? Does anybody know why he would believe that when God hadn't told him directly in this story to go up and do that? And did you hear what he said? He said, listen, let's just go up there. He said, for all we know, God may give them into our hand. Said, because God is not limited. He can win with a few, or he can win with a bunch of people. There's two of us, but God can win with a few. Why did he have the sense that God would be with him if he did that? Can anybody think of an answer to that? Uh-huh. Right. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah. Exactly. He knew what God was capable of doing, is what you're saying. Mm-hmm. Okay. So, for the sake of the video, what Scott said was, it was because he had seen what God had done in his forefather's life, and he knew God was well able and capable of doing it. Did you have something? He absolutely was stepping out in faith. He was just believing that God would empower him to do that. Tina? He wasn't limiting God, wasn't putting him into a box. But none of you have answered my question, or my intended question. It was, why did he do it? And there's an answer to that. I mean, all of your answers were correct. Mm-hmm. That's true. That's absolutely true. But it goes deeper than that. And what it is it goes all the way back to where God had told Moses that you're going to go into this land and you're going to take it. And you're going to overthrow every one of the ites. Hittites, Hivites, Perizzites, every one of them. You're going to overthrow every one of them. And those names, interestingly enough, each one of those names that God named the names of all these peoples that they were going to drive out of the promised land, and they hadn't all been driven out just yet. And the names of those different groups of people, enemies, mean things. When you look the names up, probably some of you know this, but one of them means lust, one means greed, I think, and there's depression. And I don't remember what they are, but you look up the definition of the names of, Hittite, Hivite, all the different ones, and they mean things that we battle in our personal life. And they're types of the things that when we get born again and we get saved, God calls us into the promised land, the good life, if you will, with him. Well, you still have these things in your flesh that we have to battle and drive out and overthrow. So I just kind of took a detour there, but back to the point. Jonathan knew the word. This is what I think. I don't often think of this until I think about it. But that is, all the way through the Bible, after the first 5 books of the Bible, from there on out, even though it was 1,000, 1,500 years past, these guys used the Bible like we do. Did y'all know that? Now, they didn't have the New Testament. They didn't have all of the prophets yet. As the prophets came along, they would write, and it would become a part of what the Jews would study and go to seek God and all that. But these guys were reading what Moses had said. And the promises, the cursings and the blessings and the commandments and all these things. They had the word like we have the word. And so, hello, brother man. Everybody say, hello, brother Will. Come on in. And so they had the same promises in the word that we have. So because of that, Jonathan likely knew, he was bound to have known, that God had already told them to go in and take the land and wipe out all the Philistines. That was just what they were supposed to do. So now they're sitting in a position where they're afraid of these Philistines again, and they're hiding out. And Jonathan's like, you know what, enough's enough, just like David would do in the next 2 chapters after this. Enough's enough. I think God might just fight with us. So he grabs his armor bearer, and they go show themselves to these enemies. The enemies look down, and they see them, and I can see them start to smirk and laugh. That's fine. Smirking and laughing and looking at these two guys, and they say in the text, when you read the text, they will say that what I get a kick out of when somebody's phone comes on is the look on your face while you're trying to kill it. The rest of us are just laughing. But anyway, so they look down and they see them and they say, hey, look, apparently these Israelites are coming out of their holes now. And so I can see them talking to each other and kind of kicking this around and say, look, we need to get these guys up here so we can go ahead and kill them or whatever. So they yell down the rock, off the rock. They yell down at them. And they say, hey, y'all come on up. We've got something to show you. You know, that's what kids say. Come on up here. We want to show you something. I'm going to show you 5 of these, you know. Come on up. We have something to show you. And so this is the coolest thing that takes place right here. So Jonathan takes off, the Bible says, on his hands and knees climbing that rock. Well, you know, you get pretty exhausted climbing big rocks on your hands and knees. And he goes up, and his armor bearer came after him. He gets to the top of the rock, pulls his sword out or whatever weapon he's using, and he starts waylaying these guys. And Scripture says that in about a half an acre, which is about the size of this room right here, in about a half an acre, he killed, or he chopped on 20 people. And as they fell down, Jonathan, his armor bearer, ran behind him, killing them. So these two guys killed 20 right there. We don't know what else was in front of him or how many, if there was others that he fought, because it doesn't say. But the story kind of goes a different direction, and it jumps back to Saul's people. Saul's got people around him. I think there's 600 of them there with him. And what happens is these enemies, soldiers, get so confused by all the screaming and yelling and the clashing of swords and whatever's going on till they begin to turn on themselves. Now you'll see that all through the Old Testament. It happens time and time again. When God's enemies are coming against him, God will cause confusion on them and they turn on themselves. It's like a good church fight. Right? A good church fight. If you just step back and let God fight the battle, the few wicked in there, because there's usually not many. Most of the people are good people, and they're getting sucked into this vortex unless the good people just sit back and don't speak into that thing. Unless you're a leader. And then you have a certain responsibility to speak into it. But just step back, and they will turn on themselves. It is amazing. It's like a, you know, the whole domestic fight thing is hilarious to me. How you get a household fight, and man, they're killing each other until the police drive up, and then they're beating up the police officer together. You know, people are weird, right? But they go. So what happens is all of these enemies, they start turning on each other, and it becomes, because there's so many of them, it becomes such a roar. They're clashing, they're fighting, they're screaming. They're scared, and the Bible says they're trembling. And there's so many of them, because we read last Sunday in the chapter before this, Sunday sermon, we read that there were 60,000 horses and chariots. Is that what it was? And 6,000 horses with men on them, and foot soldiers like the sand of the sea, I think is what we read Sunday. So you got all of these people, and they all start getting confused, and they don't know if they're being attacked, and they start attacking each other, and it becomes such a thing till they literally begin to shake the earth. There were so many of them running and fighting and running and fighting. So Saul hears what's going on. He asks the question, okay, is everybody with us? Because we're fixing to do this. And he had them call roll. When they called roll, they found out that Jonathan and his armor bearer weren't there. A few things ensue there, and things move on. And then Saul gets his men, and they all go in, and guess what? They don't hardly even have to fight because these guys are killing themselves. And you go on down, and all these other people start joining them. I'm trying to get through this story so I can get back to tell you what my points are that have nothing to do with what you've heard so far. Very little to do with what you've heard so far. But so, they're all turning on each other. There were Hebrews who were with the Philistines that had gone up to stay with them and just to be servants to them. They rose up and start fighting with Saul. There's a few different groups, people who are hidden in Michmash and people hidden in Gilead. They all come out, all these Israelites, and all of a sudden you've got a huge number of Israelites coming into battle, and they defeat the Philistines that day, and who's left runs away. And it says this. Look at the last verse in that chapter. So the Lord saved Israel that day, and the battle shifted to Bethaven. God saved Israel. Everybody say, God saved the king. And that he did. And the battle shifted to Bethaven. So what is Bethaven? Well, Bethaven means house of nothing. Literally house of nothingness. And the next verse says, and the children of Israel and the people of Israel, the warriors, were distressed. And it goes on to another story that we're not going into right now because I'm fixing to back up and tell you what we've been talking about. But you can come through a mighty battle with the Lord fighting for you sometimes, come out on the other side, and the battle's over, and you don't know how to stop fighting. I read, so I've been through two, I keep saying this church split thing tonight for whatever, it's just fun to talk about. I've been through two really good church splits. They were a lot of fun. They're a blast. And both of them we recovered from quickly. Now, I say quickly in comparison to the norm. The norm is when churches have a bad falling out and church split and there's fighting going on, 7 to 30 years before it's forgotten. That's the stats on it. People won't let go of stuff. But both of these issues, we pulled out of them, and it takes a year or two. We pulled out, we kept going. God began to add to the church again, and we just kept on running, and things were better than they were before. And I read somewhere that the determining factor to how quick you recover is how quick the pastor recovers. Because what happens is if the pastor doesn't recover, he keeps beating people up from the pulpit on and on and on and on, and he won't let it die. When we moved to Illinois, and we took that church up there, it had 26 people. They had been through some really, really bad stuff before we ever got there. The group that caused the trouble was the group that caused the trouble with us. And when I was stunned when one of my elders, the guy that actually rose up and started the trouble later when we were there, I was stunned once when he told me about the problem they had and the church split they had and they had to fire the pastor and run him off and all this kind of stuff. And he's telling me about it. And, I know sometimes that may be necessary. You don't know the situation. And he's telling it. And I said, wow. I said, when was that? He said, oh, that's been 30 years ago. It was 1977 or something like that. I said, what? He said, yeah, it's been 30 years ago. And I thought to myself, and you still have an issue with that? We have to let things go. And so you let things go, you love people, you forgive them the best you can, and when it comes back up, you let it go again. But here's the deal. You will and I will recover from hurt from people when we let things go. If you don't let go, it won't let go of you. And we talked about bitterness a couple weeks back. I'm not going to do that again. But now what I want to do with this story is not what you may have been focused on while I was talking about it. What I want to show you in this story is the armor bearer. How many of you have ever read about armor bearers in the Old Testament? There's a lot said about armor bearers that protected David. King Saul had an armor bearer. All the kings had armor bearers. Many of your upper level other soldiers in upper level positions would have had an armor bearer. And armor bearers are unnoticed. They're like a framework, a support system that the warrior himself cannot survive, or the king himself cannot do what he's called to do if he doesn't have an armor bearer or a support structure, if you will, a support system. So this armor bearer, if you took the armor bearer out of this picture, it's likely that Jonathan would not have had the courage that he had to say, hey, let's do this. I can't say he wouldn't, because Samson did some pretty powerful things. There were some other people that did some things. But there's something about having someone in your life to support you. You need support. And again, if you don't have that person in your life right now, is it relationally? If you don't, you do have the church. People in the church will come alongside of you and support you, but you have to open up and you have to be willing to be vulnerable so people know your need. Sometimes people will get upset with the church, say, well, I had this need and nobody ever helped me. But you know what? You never told us. We've all known of people to leave a church because they went in the hospital and the preacher never showed up. And he comes to find out, nobody told the preacher. I'm the guy that visits people. There'll be weeks I might go to the hospital 5 to 10 times. Nashville, Murfreesboro, here, there, Williamson, here. Yeah. And most people don't know that Lori and I even do that. Some of you know because you're closer to us. But then there's those times that slip by you and you didn't even know. And somebody's upset with you. And so we can't be perfect. But you know what you need? What you need and I need in every walk of life, every area of responsibility that we carry, you need an armor bearer. You need somebody there who does what this guy did, and that's what I want to point out is what he did. So look real quick, chapter 14, verse 1. Now it happened one day that Jonathan, the son of Saul, said to the young man who bore his armor. This guy's just called a young man. Jonathan is called the son of Saul, the king's son. He said, "Come, let us go up to the let us go up over to the Philistine garrison that's on the other side." But he did not tell his father. So here's the story again. Jonathan tells this to his armor bearer. And his armor bearer doesn't start shaking and quaking and, I don't know. I'm not going. I don't think I can do that. We'll lose, man. We'll lose. And anybody in here that saw, what's that Christmas movie we watch every year? We used to watch every year? The fourth wise man. Anybody ever seen the movie, The Fourth Wise Man? Okay, well, I won't tell the whole story, but it's great. It's a fictional story about a fourth wise man who didn't go with the three and did blah, 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 blah. But he has a servant with him. And this servant is a thorn in his flesh. He's always, the fourth wise man is trying to find Jesus. And he's trying to find him. And he's going. And this other guy's like, this ain't going to work. You're going to die. They're going to kill us out here. We're going to die from leprosy. And the whole movie, this servant is just beating this guy down. But the fourth wise man is determined he's going to find the Christ child. And he spends his whole life trying to find him, and he never does. And his heart goes bad, and he's about to die from a heart attack. And he's walking back, and they've just taken Jesus through the streets to be crucified, and he saw him. And now he's like, he spent his whole life trying to find him from the time Jesus was born. Spent all that he had. He spent all of his money, all of his wealth to find Jesus. When he finally found him, he's poor. He spent most of his life in a leprosy colony taking care of sick lepers because he loved people. And when he was doing that, Jesus was over here doing his ministry, and he didn't get to see him. Finally, Jesus is being carried to the cross. He sees him. He's distraught. He's disappointed. He's walking back with his cane or whatever, and he can't hardly walk. He can't hardly see. He's blind. He's old. His heart's bad. And he starts to die from a heart attack. And Jesus speaks to him. He hears him audibly, and he said, well done, my son. When you've done it to the least of these, you've done it unto me. And he says, not so, my Lord. When did I visit you in prison? And he said, you fed me when I was hungry, and you gave me drink when I was thirsty. And he says, not so, my Lord. When did I ever see you thirsty? And it's just a powerful moment. And that has nothing to do with what I was trying to get to either. But his servant is constantly trying to stop him. Let's go back. You're never going to find this baby. It's a farce anyway. It's not true. It's not going to happen. He fights him. He fights him. He fights him. He fights him all the way to the end. You know what? Everybody needs somebody that stands with them instead of fighting them. You need an armor bearer. I need an armor bearer. Dwayne Sheriff taught a whole series of lessons on this concept of an armor bearer, and he taught it in the sense of leadership, that every leader needs someone to come alongside of them and stand with them and support them. But we do that for each other as well. Lori is an armor bearer to me, and I'm an armor bearer to her sometimes. There are times that we defend each other, and you need people to defend you. So here's this guy. He's just called a young man. Go on down. all the way down the story to verse 6. Then Jonathan said to the young man who bore his armor, "Come and let us go over to the garrison of these uncircumcised. It may be that the Lord will work for us. For nothing restrains the Lord from saving by many or by few." So his armor bearer said to him, "Do all that is in your heart. Go then. Here I am with you according to your heart." Now here's what I want you to hear. This is what an armor bearer does. And what he said to him, this again, Jonathan says, "We're fixing to go fight an entire army, you and I." And this guy naturally should have said, "No, we're not." And he should have run off. But he said, listen to what he said. It's profound. So the armor bearer said to him, "Do all that is in your heart." Now this is the first thing that an armor bearer will do, a true armor bearer will do. He will recognize the vision in the heart of his leader. He's willing to see. And I can't explain vision. I've had a terrible time trying to teach on vision all my life. John Scott and those that have been around here forever heard me say a million times, I don't know what my vision is. But I do. And people will come up and tell me, "Well, brother, your vision," I've been hearing it all my life from everybody else what my vision is. And they pretty much have all said the same thing. But I'm like, God, what do I do today? I just want to do today right. If I can get today right, tomorrow will take care of itself, right? But I've got things in my heart that I want to do. But the armor bearer knows his leader, and he knows the heart of his leader, and he will recognize it. And so this guy said, "You do everything that's in your heart." Why would he say that? Because he knew already Jonathan well, and he knew Jonathan to be a man of faith, a man of God, and he knew if this guy thinks God said to do it, God was going to do it. And he stood up beside him. So watch what he said. Watch this. He said, "Go then." Everybody say, "Go then." He didn't say, "I know what's in your heart. Man, you got a great vision. But let's give it 6 months and think about it. Let's shelve that for a little while. Oh, we don't have enough money to do that. Well, you got a great idea there. Yeah, let's get about 12 people together and vote on it." You know what his armor bearer said to him was? "Let's do it, buddy. Let's do it." Yeah, the armor bearer doesn't judge the heart of the leader. The armor bearer says, "I'm here to serve. Where are we going? Who are we fighting? When are we going to do it? If you die, I die, but let's do this." And it's hard to find a real armor bearer. Dwayne Sheriff's ministry, Dwayne is a phenomenal teacher. He's in Oklahoma. He has, I don't know how many churches now. I don't know. Tons of churches. And he's given away probably 20,000 messages on tapes, back where tapes were the things, and then CDs, and now digital. Never charged for any of that. Just a phenomenal teacher. But we watched him. We pastored a little church in Oklahoma we started years ago. And Dwayne started his a few years before we did. Or took a church. It was small. And he was running 400 when we met him. Well, we watched him, and we have known him personally and had him minister for us. And Lori's brother-in-law and sister are on staff at his church. They're top-level leaders there. And so we've watched his ministry grow to tens of thousands, literally, his online ministry, everything. We've watched it grow. But you know what I saw from the conception of that ministry? He had 2 armor bearers. 2 men, Rick and Lee. They have been with him for 35 to 40 years now. They fill his pulpit when he's out traveling all over the world, getting all the glory, controlling the whole ministry. This thing is huge. Dwayne is at the helm of the ship, and everybody's looking at Dwayne, but Lee and Rick have carried that load for him for 35 to 40 years now. I don't know the exact number, but we've watched it for years. These guys are like a rock. Anything that needs doing, they do it. If it's clean a toilet, if it's preach from the pulpit, if it's go out and start a church that he says start, they are armor bearers, and they're there to support him. And they have their ministry there has been such a huge part of Dwayne. Now, I know Dwayne greatly appreciates him, but now he's got a whole slew of armor bearers and people that are around him, and that's why his ministry continues to grow and explode, do what it's doing, because they're a team, they're together, they're doing this together, and they've got each other's back. But everybody has Brother Dwayne's vision. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. If you've ever been in a large ministry, you know how that works. Yeah? Mm-hmm. They absolutely could. And so because they stayed together they all have this great ministry that they're a part of. And it takes support for anybody to do anything well. Again, Proverbs says 2 are better than 1. 2 are better than 1. If 1 can put 1,000 to flight, 2 can put 10,000. If 2 can put 10,000, how many can a church put to flight? We're talking about fighting the enemy. We're talking about warfare, spiritual warfare. If we rise up together and get in one accord, man, we can do some stuff. Right? Mm-hmm. Yes, he sure did. That's a great point. He sure did. He defended David, when really he might have been the rightful heir to the throne. Yeah. He did, didn't he? Yes. Wow. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Right. Right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's a good point. Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. That's good. That's good. Yeah. Yep. Anybody else want to comment? About out of time. Mm-hmm. Exactly. Right. Yeah. Mm-hmm. You're right. You're right. So he said 3 things. He said, do all that's in your heart. Go then. And then he said, here I am with you according to your heart. So, the armor bearer was a man with a heart after Jonathan. Like David was a man with a heart after God. And that sounds like, oh, well, he should have had a heart after God. Well, I'm sure he did. And he expressed it by having a heart after his authority and his leader. That's the way he expressed that. It says, you do whatever's in your heart. Because, man, I am here. If it's in your heart, again, mind you, I know you to be a man of God. So if it's in your heart, I'm with you. And together we can do this thing. So these guys climb up the rock, start a fight, pick a fight on a big army, kill a bunch of them, and then God takes over from there and just begins to turn the whole thing. So you know what happened? This is really interesting. When the fight ensues and they're up there confused and turning on each other, hundreds of thousands of them apparently, killing each other and fighting each other, the roar of the feet, the roar of the chariots, the roar of the horses, all the clashing of the swords start to shake until the Bible says, and this is in the Bible, so get y'all listen up to this, it's in the Bible, it said the entire earth quaked. Well, I've got to think that God really sent an earthquake. That it was more than these guys stomping on the ground. I mean, you know, we've all seen people stomping. You can kind of shake the stadium a little bit when that whole place gets going. So that's doable. But I don't doubt about what God calls an earthquake. And the thing that just kind of jumped out to me when I read that was, it's like God said, look, if you'll step out in faith and honor me and honor my word and do what I've called you to do, man, I'll shake the whole world for you. I'll cause an earthquake, whatever needs to be done. I'll stop the sun for 24 hours and not let it move. I'll cause the river to not flow and to freeze up. Whatever you need done, if you'll step out in faith and do it, God says, I'll be right there, and I'll manipulate nature for you. That's just really cool, I thought. Yeah. So, there you have it. So there's 2 things about armor bearers. Number 1, we all need to be an armor bearer. And we need an armor bearer. It's just a simple leadership principle. You know, you got to have support. 2 are better than 1. And if we want to do this thing together and make it happen, we need to stand together. Amen? Any final comments before we close?
On that verse that you read in verse 7 that said, Mary said, I'm with you according to your heart. Now when I wrote that word chord is the root word of it, chord, is literally a musical term. In harmony with it. And so literally a good armor bearer is in harmony with his leader's heart. And it's not off key.
That's good.
You're not trying to sing
Flowing together.
You're not trying to sing solo, but it's in harmony. And so
And that's great. You know, that brings to my mind, when you have, I think the way to put this, I want to say pastor and assistant pastor because I pastor and that's what my thoughts are. But if you're in supervision, whatever, you got a guy, if you're running a job, plumber, right? You're running a job, you've got a, what do you call a guy that's training? An apprentice. You've got an apprentice. And so you guys are working on a job, doing a job together. He's working for you. You don't want him competing with you and telling you how the job's supposed to be. And that's what happens is there's so much self-agenda in people that man, when the people that are supposed to support you turn out to be about themselves, they will kill the vision, they'll quench the fire, they'll stop the thing to work. When we left the heart, my heart had not left that church or that town. The Lord wasn't. She didn't feel what I felt there, and it's probably a good thing because it did help me to make my mind up when the time came. But she wanted to be back down south. Long story. I did too. It was hard to be back down south. But my heart was for that church, and I was like, we're going to do this thing. We've been there 7 years. And I made a commitment to the Lord when I went there that I would not leave for 3 years. If they drove me out with a pickaxe, I'd take it to the back of the head. I was not going anywhere for 3 years. 3 years came. We had that split. I said, I'm not going anywhere. I made a commitment to the Lord. I stayed another 5 years. And then it was 7 years. At the end of 7 years, we had done a lot. We finished out some sanctuary, a big fellowship hall, and grown from 26 to 260, so pretty big growth, and things in that way. But then there was a project that I wanted to do, a construction project. And it was going to cost $100,000, which was not a blow in the head to us. That church financially was stronger than this church is. And I felt like it was very important. To me it was. And maybe nobody else saw it. But to me it was important. And so I went to my elders. I said, guys, I really believe we're supposed to do this. And I think it's going to make all the difference in the world and attracting people to the church. I'll just leave it at that. And they just flat said, no, we can't afford that. We're not going to do that. And my heart left. And I left. Now, I'm not saying that when you don't get what you want, you need to pack your bags and run. I stayed 7 years. So don't misread what I said. I stayed through other things that people weren't agreeing with. But that was the final thing where God said, okay, I want you to see that their heart is not with you anymore. And when I saw that, I went home with Lori and I said, we're gone. She said, we are. I said, well, I'm going to start seeking the Lord and find out where we go. So I sent out 2 resumes. That's all I sent out. One here, one was down in Knoxville or somewhere. And we stayed there another 11 months before the move took place. And I was faithful there, and I worked hard, and I preached hard, and I did what I did until that time was up. But when I knew that I no longer had the heart of those that were my armor bearers, I knew there was no need to be in there. Like there's nothing you can do. You can't do anything by yourself. Jesus said, when 2 or 3 are agreed on something, there I'll be in their midst. Or whatever they ask, he said, I will do it for them. But if you can't believe with me, guess what? We are not going forward. And I'm saying, when you are the leader of the thing. It's the same way with a business owner. You get a guy in there that's working for you, you got a teamwork, kind of construction business, I've been around it my whole life too. There's nothing like construction business. Everybody wants to be their own boss in construction world. Everybody does. And they want to piggyback off you. Here's what they want to do. They want to come work for you so that they can then go get your work and pull your jobs away from you and have their own thing. That's just the way the world processes and things. Everything's about them. In the church, we're supposed to be different. Everything is supposed to be about God's vision for the house, God's vision for what he's doing in the world today. What's he doing in the church today? How is he doing it? How is he going to lead us through our leaders to do that? And until people get that, There's only so much you can accomplish. But women get it, there's nothing they cannot accomplish. Genesis chapter 6, 10, 11. 11. One of those. You know, when they were going up, all the people were going up, and they built the Tower of Babel, and God said, there's nothing they cannot do because they have one mind and one heart. He said, there's nothing they can put their mind to if they cannot do. What does nothing mean? That's a pretty big statement. I don't know how that works out. That's what he said. And when it translates down to us, we as a church, what God's called us to do, the congregation as people, what God's called you to do in your household. Wives, you need to line up with your husband's vision. Now, I know that don't sound good in today's culture. Your responsibility is to support your husband. That's what God has called you to do. It says in the scripture, for the woman was made for the man and not the man for the woman. Now, I didn't just say generally it says that. No, I just quoted the scripture to you. The woman was made for the man, not the man for the woman. That's what the scripture says. But it also says, husbands, love your wives like Christ loves the church and gave himself up for her, that he might wash her with the water of the word, present her to himself, a spotless bride. Let me tell you, it's a whole lot more on a man that's doing it right than it is on a woman. All the woman has to do is just say, God, you lead him, and I'll follow what you do. Now, it's not easy to do that.
That's right.
But it's more difficult to say, God, okay, what are you telling my family to do? Because if I mess this up, this woman, these children are dependent upon me. It's like everybody wants to own their own business until they have one.
Come on, Lord.
I've owned a few different things, different kind of businesses of my own over the years. Everybody wants to be you. You know why? Because they hadn't been there. Am I telling the truth? That's exactly right. Taxes come up. Customers mad. Guess what? They all get to say, the boss is back there. Right? It's always the guy at the top that gets it. I'm not saying it's not hard being a woman. It's really hard being a woman putting up with today's man. It's very hard. But if we will all find out what we're called to and do what we're called to, it becomes easy because God, He graces you for that thing. My wife is and several women in this church. I'm just going to leave it at that. Absolutely mean it's on my heart. We have many women in this church that understand what submission to authority is, and they love being underneath their husband. Now there's that word, underneath. See, there you go. He's one of them. Do you know what underneath means? It means I'm the umbrella. I take the lightning bolt. That's what it means. It don't mean I'm up here with a big foot stomping on your throat. Everybody knows my wife will bite back. We're 100% equals in our household. All right. We absolutely are 100% equals. You know, I run everything in the house. Vacuum cleaner, dishwasher. No, we really work together very well with that. I know it's time for you too. I'll quit my throat. So, you just remember. But, how long have we been married? 37, 36 years?
37.
A whole lot of years later, you know what you find out after all those years? All that kicking and scratching and fighting. You know what you find out at the end of it? Some things she's never going to change. There's some things I'm never going to change. And so, guess who changed? I had to change on what she's not going to change. She had to change on what I'm not going to change. Because we really decided that we love each other and we're going to be together.
That's right.
And if I'm going to have to be with you, and she knows I'm not going to wash those dishes, because I don't wash dishes. But I did today, didn't I?
You sure did.
That's right. Because I knew I was going to be talking about this tonight. No, I'm kidding. No, but I don't wash dishes. So she no longer asks me to wash dishes. Ever. She never does. I will empty the dishwasher anytime, every time. That's something I don't mind doing. And then there are things that she doesn't do that they don't get done, I'm going to do them. I mean, it's just the way it is, right? So that's what all submission means, is that you're in one mind, in one accord, and somebody has to be the final say when it comes down to this is where I'm going. And how did all that come out of an armor bearer thing? I don't know. But y'all follow what I'm saying? You need somebody in your life, we all do, and every leader does, who says, hey, let's go do this. You can do it. The last story I've told it here before, probably 3 or 4 times. It's just pertinent to the issue tonight. Probably I've said this in the last month, it seems like. But Larry Lee, if I mentioned that, Larry Lee's thing, he started a church in Dallas, grew to 10,000 in 4 years, 5 years, something like that. And this was back in the early 80s when there were no 10,000 member churches hardly. And he wanted to do some project. He said, guys, it's going to cost $100,000. And they said, well, we're not sure about that, but if you want to do it, we'll do it. And so he did it, and it flopped, and he lost every dime with that money immediately. He lost $100,000. I don't know what the issue was. He just told the story and heard it tell him. And he said he went back with his head down to his elders meeting, and he was ashamed. He said, God, I don't know what to tell you, that I was wrong, it blew up. And they said, so what's your next one? That's what he was like. You know, a lot of churches were throwing him out on his rear and said, dude, I can't believe you stupid idiot, you just did that. But you know what? He went on to build that church with 10,000 people.
That's right.
Because they didn't throw him away, but they stood with him. And if somebody will just say, I've learned this huge in my life, and I use it now. And it's been in the last 85 years maybe that I learned this. But when I talk to someone who is struggling and going through a difficulty, I try to always say to them, you're going to get through this. You can do this. This will work out. Hey, it's okay. We got a text yesterday from somebody in the community that doesn't go to our church, not our congregation. She just said, I'm scared. I went to the doctor. I've got these symptoms. I Googled it. I think I've got, she named the disease. I tried to call her, talk to her, encourage her. She couldn't answer the phone because she was falling apart. And Lori sent her a text and said, could you talk with Darryl? And she couldn't do it. You know, she couldn't do it because she was underneath the duress of all this. So I told Lori, I said, let's just go to her house. So we drove over, went to her house, knocked on the door. She answered the door, invited us in, we sat down and talked, and I just began to tell her all the reasons that she does not have that disease.
Right.
So y'all hear what I'm saying?
Right.
Now, because the devil is a liar,
Amen.
and the truth is not in him.
That's right.
But if he can get you to believe you've got something, sometimes he can go ahead and put it on you. Because it's faith. Fear is faith in reverse.
Right.
You're believing for the bad thing. That is faith. And Jesus said, whatever you believe, you'll have it. And so, I told her every reason in the world she's not going to have that. I told her, I said, you're grieving. She just lost her husband. I said, you're grieving. When you grieve, the first year of grief, one symptom of losing a spouse is, or anybody very close to you, who dies of a sickness, the first year, you will think you've got a major sickness and you'll think you're going to die. It's grief. I said, you're going through that, number one. Number two, these are the symptoms that thing has, that all these other things out here have the same symptoms. And the devil sent you to Google to pull up the worst one first shot. That's the way he works. And third thing is this. Dr. Cox told me this when I went in. Thought I was dying from nothing. Didn't have anything wrong, but I went in. I took my list of all my anxiety issues. This was years back. All these problems. And I said, you don't think you're so-and-so or whatever, do you? You know how you do. And he said, Pastor, he said, let me tell you something. He said, when people come to our office, he said, we look at the horses before we look at the unicorns. He said, and there's hardly any unicorns out there. You'll get the point?
Yeah.
Point is, there's a million things that could be. Why do you think it's that? It's because it's not. But anyway, but I said to her, let me just say this. You're going to be okay. You are absolutely going to be fine. And we're going to pray for you. If there's anything wrong, we're going to believe God's going to heal you. But you don't have to worry about this. You're fine. Lori prayed for her. We held hands. Lori prayed for her. And our little girls were there. We got through praying. She just said, thank you so much. And shot her a text when we left. Said, I feel so much better. Blah, blah, blah. People just need somebody to say, go and do this. You're okay. You're going to get through it. You can do it. God is with you. There's nothing too big for you. People need somebody to come alongside and support. And so how do you get somebody to do that? you do it to somebody else. When you become that person, God will send that person. Or raise that person up around you. I better stop. I need to play a song, Genesis. But I did. All right, let's pray. Lord, thank you. It's your word is yes and amen. And God, Jonathan was a man who just believed that what you had said they were to do, that you would be with him in the doing of it. And so he rose up in faith and attacked an army much larger than him. And even when he said, God is able to defeat this enemy with a few or with a bunch, doesn't matter. He went in faith, and you honored that faith, God, and he won that war, that battle, because you did honor your word and stay with me. So, Father, tonight I just pray that you just encourage all of us to get rid of every doubt that we have, every fear that the enemy's put on us, everything the devil tries to do to keep us from becoming what you called us to be, to know that you are with us. And I pray that you would send armor bearers and support staff alongside of each one of us in our life to encourage us, to strengthen us, to be with us. But I pray that you also would open our eyes to the fact that we can be an armor bearer and a support to others as well. God, you've given us that commission, and we want to do that, Father. I pray that you just empower us to do it, and we thank you for it in Jesus' name. Amen. 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 Praise the Lord.